Hey y'all, what's up? My name's Angela, and this month I'm going to be reading the hyped books that BookTube recommended in 2020. So I looked through my TBR and I picked out a list of books that I'd heard about through multiple booktubers, and this is quite an ambitious list for me, and I already pared it down from the original list of books that I had, so maybe I'll do this video again for another month where I just finish reading all the books that I really wanted to read in 2020. So the plan, I want to read Jade City by Fonda Lee, The Beautiful by Renee Ahdieh, Locking Every Door by Riley Sager, Mexican Gothic by Sylvia Moreno Garcia, Middlegame by Shauna McGuire, Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston, The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune, The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson, Anxious People by Friedrich Bachman, These Violet Delights by Chloe Gong, and The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. So I'll do this in kind of a vlog style. I'll update after I finish each book, or in between, I guess, if the book is like really speaking to me, and I'll take you along with me on the ride. Also, I just wanted to point out that I have a link to a comprehensive list of content and trigger warnings for the books that I mentioned in my videos. Please refer to that if you want to know, but be warned that they will be like spoilery. So, yep, that's there for you if you would like to check this out. Welcome to another Midnight Update. It's been about a week since I started this, and I have two books to talk about with y'all. So I first read Middlegame by Shauna McGuire, and then These Violet Delights by Chloe Gong. So let's start with Middlegame, the book that I think is the hardest to describe out of all the books that I've chosen. This book follows a set of twins, Roger and Dodger, who are the products of this alchemical experiment to embody the very nature of life, of being, of power itself. Yeah, it's quite a hard book to place. The question is, did I enjoy this book? And yes, I had a really good time reading it. I listened to the audiobook. I do feel like the audiobook was pretty good. I think the best way to market this book is that it's not like a fantasy, it's not a sci-fi, and I don't think the expectation going into it should be plot focused as much as it is character focused. What I got out of this book was definitely just the synergy between Roger and Dodger, and also between them as a set and their environment. Like, just the descriptions of that kind of relationship and just the harmony and the synergy that exists in that is really beautiful and profound. The writing itself is obviously very beautiful. Shauna McGuire is an amazing writer and knows how to like paint a really vivid scene. If you're looking for order and rules behind the non-realistic parts of the book, I don't think you'll find that here. And on that note, that kind of like vagueness and the kind of like whimsical nature of this book almost reminded me a lot of 1Q84 by Haruki Murakami, in the sense that it incorporates a lot of these elements of the like real life kind of things, like magic and time jumping, but it doesn't make that like the center focus of the story. It's a huge part of the plot, but also at the same time, that's not the thing you're supposed to come away with from the story. I grew to really like Roger and Dodger, and also this world that they've set up. I thought the plot honestly was pretty like well-rounded, and it was really interesting trying to piece together everything. And overall, great experience. Would recommend Middlegame. It definitely lived up to its hype. I thought it was just as good as everyone has been saying it is. And the next book is These Violet Delights, which is a 1920s Romeo and Juliet set in Shanghai. So we're following Juliet and Roma, who are from two rival gangs in Shanghai, and amidst all the kind of gang violence as well as political tension that they have to involve themselves with, there's this monster and this plague that is spreading around Shanghai and it's killing a lot of people. So Roma and Juliet have to work together to try to figure out the root to the problem and to stop it before it kills the city. I fell in love from the prologue with Chloe Gong's writing style. It's so vivid and so like visceral and descriptive. I don't find myself elevating stories because of how like flowery or how like rich the writing is, but this, like, the writing style really added to the setting, I feel like. This plot is a lot more complex than I thought going into it. It focuses quite a bit on the political power dynamics shifts between these different groups, between the West, between the two gangs. That you talk about the communist versus nationalist parties that the gangs have to kind of like tread lightly with. And boy, was I surprised when I got to the end and realized that this book was a series and not just a standalone. Not sure how that knowledge escaped from me, but it makes more sense now why I was getting to the end and I was like, there are so many things that are left untied up. Like, where are we going with this? It's a series. I don't think the romance was the strongest part of this book. It felt like we were really banking on the fact that we know Romeo and Juliet are like this. So in the story, Roma and Juliet are obviously like, we want them to be together, but like, do we? There's so much tension between them, but it was kind of unjustified. Like, it didn't make sense why, and I couldn't care either ways if they got together or not. I'd say the romance is pretty secondary to the main plot, and the plot really shines by itself, like, in spite of how the romance was. I really enjoyed reading These Violent Delights. I think it was a great spin on the original Romeo and Juliet, and in a completely different kind of setting, like 1920s Shanghai. Who would have thought? That's pretty darn cool. Very, very early this morning, I finished The House in the Cerulean Sea, and I get it now. I get it. I understand why everyone's in love with this book. I am in love with this book. So in this book, we follow Linus Baker, who is a caseworker for the department in charge of magical youths. Basically, he's a caseworker for like a CPS in a reality where there are magical creatures. He's given a top secret assignment to go to a remote village to check out an orphanage of really powerful children. And the orphanage is run by this man, Arthur Parnassus, who is also very mysterious to the department, at least. If we only isolate the book by its plot and its like character growth and like the very core things about like a story, I would say it's a pretty static book. You know, the characters do grow and you see them kind of evolve, but the plot especially didn't really like go to new heights or like really like create any sort of conflict or tension that made you kind of wonder what was going to happen next. Rather, I think it's this nostalgia and this feeling of love and happiness that exists within this orphanage and between our main characters. At its core, it's one of the like truest found family tropes in a book, and I think this is like found family done absolutely right. The layers to the concept of acceptance in this book, whether it's from the people around you or from kind of society, is crafted so well. And I think that's like the main message and why people come away from this reading this book so like happy and just feeling so warm on the inside. This is the book I recommend if you really want like a happy kind of escapist book, because while I was reading this book, I fell into this world that was so bright, so vibrant, absolutely wonderful to learn about. And I think this is a perfect book to have been published in a time that is quite dark for a lot of people. So it's like a really comforting read. Hello, so I just finished Jade City by Fonda Lee. And this is a fantasy book set in a world where a certain clan of people have the ability to harness jade and get like supernatural powers from them. And we're mainly following the tension and the struggle and the war between two clans or gangs, basically the No Peak clan and the Mountain clan. And we're mainly following from the point of view from the No Peak clan, so the family members in that clan. So this book really kind of reminded me of like a slightly Asian-inspired Game of Thrones, both in its storytelling and especially in the complexity of its world building. There's a lot of plot threads working together in tandem to kind of add complexity to the conflict of the plot and to really enrich this world. As you can maybe tell by kind of just the way I'm talking about this book, I wasn't the biggest fan. What I really didn't like about it was just the way that it was told. This story is written in a very distanced, third person kind of like storytelling. It's all about the things that are happening, but you don't really deep dive into any of like the characters. You don't get like the connections between them. This was really reminiscent of Game of Thrones for me, like the writing style, and I really didn't like Game of Thrones either. They have the same very like detached way of telling this very complex story that just kind of, it really threw me off. This is literally just like a personal preference thing. I think this book was really, really well written, but it just wasn't for me. I think the biggest thing that kept me very distant from the book was just how like testosterone filled this book was. Like, it's marketed as like a, was it like a Godfather with kung fu involved, and I would say that's really accurate. Like, that is very accurate for like the marketing. If you enjoy both those things, you will highly enjoy this book. I think what it really came down to was I didn't care about like 90% of the people in this book. I thought the feud was like not pointless, but like you really have to be in a mind frame where like brotherhood and clan identity is like all you are, and that to me, those concepts to me just don't make sense. So that's why my detachment from this book is quite personal. Like, objectively, I think this book is really good, but like I did not enjoy reading it. I think I took like 4 or 5 days just to get through this book, and the only reason I finally got through it was because I had the audiobook. And I'm really glad to be moving forward. I'm definitely going to pick up something lighter for the next read, or at least more contemporary. I'm thinking Red, White, and Royal Blue just because I have that audiobook as well. So crossing fingers, hope it works out. I am in love. I'm just, serotonin is just overflowing right now. So I picked up Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston today, yesterday, the 15th. It's like 12:30 a.m. the 16th. I read it literally all in one sitting, and it was so. Gathering my thoughts, Red, White, and Royal Blue is about the first son of the United States, Alex. He has this very strong dislike towards Prince Henry, and they end up getting in the situation where they make a big spectacle. It's kind of a shameful on both of their parts, and they end up having to make nice and pretend to be friends. And along the way, a little friendship, then romance develops. I love this book. I unabashedly love this book. There's something about it. I don't know if it's maybe the Texas references. I went to school in Texas, so all like the references to Texas-y things makes me feel very like fuzzy on the inside. I love the really casual mentions of diversity and just the wonderful representation of like sexuality as well in this book. I love the dynamics between the characters. Like, I think that this has a really strong like family dynamic, especially like Alex and his sister June, Alex and Nora, their friendship, just the like the bonds that you have outside of this main romantic relationship are also so well done. I love how supportive Alex's immediate family is of his relationship and his sexuality. The issue of family not being supportive of a non-heterosexual relationship does come up in the book, but I don't think it's like a super like heavy tension in the plot. I'm surprised at myself because there are some things that happened in this book that I normally would not like. Like, I normally don't like mention of in-depth politics or like a campaign in a book. I normally don't like that at all, and somehow this book made it work. I liked following Alex around. Well, also another thing is that we don't go super in depth to the strategies of like a political campaign, so I think that's probably why it worked well for me. And another thing that like I usually don't like in books is like excessive mentions of pop references. Like, we got a BTS reference in this book, and that shook me. I was like, I was not expecting that. I was like, oh, where is BTS coming in? But there are so many references to pop culture in this book that I normally wouldn't like, but somehow I found endearing. Everything about this book is just very endearing to me. And I don't know, I liked it. I really did. I really liked it. I feel like whenever I read these stories with these tropes that I like, or whenever I read like a romance that has like the romance tropes that I like, suddenly I believe in love again. Well, I'm off to read a dark book now. So I finished Anxious People by Frederick Bachman, and this story is about a bank robbery gone wrong, turned into a hostage situation, and you're basically following the lives of all these people who are like being held hostage, as well as the bank robber, and how they're ultimately kind of tied together. So I have a lot of mixed feelings about this book, just because the more I read Frederick Bachman's works, the less I like them. With every book that I read from him, my appreciation for his type of writing kind of decreases. I think the ultimate message of like bad things happen to good people and life is still ultimately worth living is effective in its storytelling. The more I read his books, the more you notice that his characters serve the message rather than the plot. So like his characters are very much like, you take all these very strong either stereotypes or like personality traits or whatever, you stick them on one person, you make it like the extreme, and then you also add this like unexpected side to the character to give them dimensionality, and you also stick that to the extreme onto this character, and what you get is it's a character with dimension, but they seem kind of fake just because the dimensionality is so forced. There were some twists and turns I wasn't expecting, so I think that carried the tension well throughout the book. I don't know, I think this might be one of the last Frederick Bachman's I pick up, just because it's like obvious now, like with the way he writes, and I don't even really end up getting like, I don't feel anything from the main message even that he's trying to give. Yeah, so maybe like a 3.5 stars. I don't think I've been saying star ratings throughout my video. I'll have like a better wrap up at the end of all my ratings, but yeah, this is kind of mixed feelings about this book. So where did we leave off? I think I just finished Anxious People. So I read 2 books after Anxious People. It's been a few days. The first book I read was The Beautiful by Renee Ahdieh. This book is set in New Orleans in, I think, the 1800s, maybe early 1900s. It follows our main character Celine, who has just fled to New Orleans from Paris. She has kind of a dark past, and as she falls more in love with the city, she gets herself involved in kind of the darker groups, maybe like different factions that exist. She finds out that there's a lot of secrets in the city, and it all starts with a murder. So I have a deep-rooted love for vampire stories, and I found that I really enjoy like old-timey supernatural vampire vibes, like Buffy and Angel, when Angel was in like the 1800s and would go through Angelus's history. I really enjoyed like the Steph and Damon Elena arc in Vampire Diaries when they were all older. Like I enjoyed that kind of vibe. So it's no surprise that I really liked The Beautiful, because that is exactly what that is. The setting and the atmosphere really make this book. It's like, it's a combination of just the fancy aesthetic of their dress, the way they talk. I also really liked Celine as a main character. I think she was really interesting. She might not be like likable for a lot of people, but I think she was certainly like, for like a vampire story heroine, she's a pretty interesting person, and she's a bit unexpected in a lot of ways. She's really witty, and she has this very dark side to her, and she like embraces that, which I really enjoy. One thing I didn't expect going in was just how much French there is in this book. Every other sentence when Celine is like conversing with someone has these little French phrases tucked into it, and you get what they mean from the context. It's not vital that you know what exactly they're saying, but I think the magic of the book is more in like how they speak and the phrases they use, the little banters they have. It's like in the details. So when you remove the details of that for someone like me who doesn't speak French, I feel like it kind of pulls you out of the book. So I would suggest having a translator app handy, or be really good at French. I don't know. That's a bad expectation. Just have a translator app handy and it solves all your problems. I translated a lot of the French phrases along the way where I felt like maybe the context didn't give me as much information as I needed, and I always was glad when I did that. So, pro tip. And yes, what everyone says about this book is true. There is very little explicit vampire activity until very, very late in the book. I think if you're looking for that like bam right from the start, we got a vamp and we're gonna like get to know this vampire and their like how they live and the people they interact with, you're not gonna get that here. It actually does make sense to me why it's kind of set up this way, because it's like a series, so the author is probably thinking more long terms in terms of like the plot and not pacing all of it out in the first book so that there's nothing left for the second book. There's a lot of loose ends to tie up in the next book/books, so I can see that, and I can also see why some people were frustrated with this book just because it's kind of slow. So you gotta really be into like the setting and like just the atmosphere of the book. I enjoyed it. I'm a sucker for like old-timey vampire stuff, so this was pretty good. And the next book I read, a complete kind of 180, is Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. This is a story about a young woman named Jules who gets this very lucrative job to apartment sit in this very old, historic, rich people building. And it seems kind of fishy because she gets paid a lot, and it turns out there are a lot of secrets in the building that she starts to uncover. I can see why people like Riley Sager and why this book is also talked about a lot, just because it's so fast-paced and the plot is really intriguing. To me, the plot wasn't really predictable, but like I had hunches right from the beginning. Like there were a lot of clues that were dropped in the first like quarter of the book that made it very obvious what was going to happen through the rest. I don't think a suspense thriller necessarily needs to be unpredictable to be good. It doesn't need to have like a ton of plot twists. So I like this book. I enjoyed reading it. It was really intriguing. I also really liked the main character, Jules. I thought that she was quite well fleshed out for like a character like she had a lot of backstory, but it wasn't like all dumped in the beginning. You found out little by little, and it really matched her character and her actions. Yeah, I think this book was fun, and I would definitely read more Riley Sager in the future. I think this is a great book to pick up if you're looking for like something to pass the time really quickly and like for you to just like get into the world. It's a great book to just zone out for like a couple hours because it's so like it just sucks you in. Happy Sunday, although I guess time is kind of irrelevant in a vlog like this. I come to you with updates on another book. So I finished The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson. This book is set in a Puritan community called Bethel, and it follows our main character, Emmanuel, whose mother was outcasted because she kind of dabbled with the, let's say, darker arts. Although Emmanuel has always been an outsider because of her mother's actions, she always tries her best to follow in line with the teachings of the good father. It's like the deity or whatever. The thing is, Emmanuel is drawn to these darker forces, and when really bad things start happening in Bethel, Emmanuel wants to find a way to put an end to them. This book is definitely very atmospheric, very dark. It's a perfect setting for a witchy supernatural book. Besides the kind of witchcraft supernatural aspect of this book, a big theme is definitely the horrors of this very strict patriarchal society and also the true sin of man. I've seen some reviews kind of linking this to like a Handmaid's Tale. I have the book, Handmaid's Tale, and I think it's got similar overtones in that you have this very like male-dominated society. Women are supposed to be weak. They're up for the grabs. They aren't supposed to be educated. So I think those themes, as well as how witchcraft and kind of religion is tied into that, is quite well done in this book. I found for me that I don't like all things supernatural. I really like vampires, werewolves, that side of the supernatural, but somehow witchcraft just doesn't appeal to me in the same way. Like I got a third of the way through the book and I was like, like it's okay, but I'm kind of bored. And then I get like halfway into the book and I'm like, I'm still kind of bored. Like this is kind of reminds me of like The Beautiful, and I think it's like the difference in subject matter, because The Beautiful does the exact same thing. It's literally built up for like 60 or 70% of the book, and I enjoy The Beautiful like way more than I enjoyed The Year of the Witching. And I really think the difference is literally just the subject matter. And again, this is a book that I didn't realize was apparently a series going into it. I don't think I want to pick up the next book. I think it could have done well as a standalone, but if the next book comes out, I'll probably like look around and see what people say about it, and then I might think about picking it up. But yeah, I think this was okay. I think witchcraft is just not a supernatural subject that appeals to me. I am very delighted to bring you all my final update for this vlog. And both of these books were really surprisingly heavy and dark. I didn't expect that. But to start off, we have The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. This follows our main character, Nora, who commits suicide and ends up at this library, which is a place between life and death. And at this library, she gets to redo her life regrets and see what kind of lives she leads if she had not had that regret. I like that this book was kind of basing the parallel lives on a more scientific route than the more fantastical. It attempts to give like reasoning for maybe why Nora ends up at this library. The parallel lives, I think, are also explained really well, and each of the lives that Nora lives adds kind of very subtly to this bigger picture and lesson that Nora gets. While the book talks about a lot of really difficult topics and really sad topics, the tone of the book is not overtly sad or depressing, and I think that makes this kind of stand out a little more, just because you don't go into the book feeling there's like that incongruency that kind of, I think, perks up a lot of people's attentions and just kind of like makes it more memorable. And I can't help but compare this book to Anxious People by Frederick Bachman, just because, you know, we're reading this in the same vlog. Both of these books have a lot of similarities. They tackle, you know, similarly tough topics about mental health. They do it in a kind of incongruent way where it's a little bit more lighter. But I think I enjoyed it more in The Midnight Library just because the way the parallel lives were made and the plot and the pacing itself was much more subtle in adding to the kind of message that I feel like the readers are supposed to come away with from the book. In Anxious People, I just felt like we were just kind of like hit over the head with these like lessons. Frederick Bachman writes with a particular rhythm to his storytelling, and you can predict it. You can predict when he's going to throw you like a curveball in the characters and in their stories or whatever, and it gets kind of old. The Midnight Library, I feel like, tackles issues of mental health in a slightly more like subtle way with a story that I genuinely enjoyed reading. One thing I also think works pretty well is that our main character Nora is quite transparent. I'm not sure if that's the best way to describe it, but her character, like, I feel like everyone could see themselves in Nora. That quality of her life, her thoughts, kind of makes the book and the message also stick a little better. And the next book I read was Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This book follows our main character Noemi, who gets a distressing letter from her cousin that takes her to High Place, the mansion that her cousin now lives in with her new husband. In trying to help her cousin, she finds out that the house, as well as the residents of the house, harbor a lot of dark secrets, and there are a lot of dark forces at work. So Gothic is entirely correct in describing this book. This is a proper kind of like Gothic haunted mansion book. It gave me the same vibes as The Haunting of Hill House, just in how alive the actual house is and how creepy it was. It's not scary necessarily. The horror is not in the jump scares, like the book jump scares, but in like just the creepy description, the unsettling imagery. This book was not a good book to read so soon after reading Lock Every Door. The Ouroboros symbol, yeah, I think we as a book community should move past that as a book symbol, because now every time I see it, I feel like I know the exact plot. And that's what happened with Mexican Gothic. Like as soon as she got to the mansion, I knew exactly what was going to happen. What I really liked was the pacing of the house kind of like getting to Noemi and like affecting how she sees things, how she thinks. I think the pacing of that was done really, really subtly, and like before you even knew it, it was like there, and it was kind of like creepy even to the reader. If you enjoyed Get Out, the movie, I feel like you'll also enjoy this book. It's a more Gothic version, less thriller, more Gothic version of Get Out. What I will say is the slowness of the book, I don't think necessarily comes from the nothing happening aspect. More, I think it's just because every interaction that Noemi has with the people in the house, it feels like it's repeated. Like she has the exact same conversations, same tone of conversations, same like dynamic with the people. Like it literally feels like it's repeated like several times. Noemi's an interesting protagonist because she's stubborn, she's headstrong, she is really brave in a lot of aspects. She's supposed to be pretty smart, which is unexpected for her because she's like debutante, she's supposed to be kind of airheaded. But there were a few moments in the book and also near the end where I was like, she did not make a lot of smart decisions. And I guess in the context of the book, it's fine, but those moments didn't really fit with her character to me, and so I feel like they were there to kind of like extend the plot and maybe like make it more dramatic. But that's a personal opinion. I honestly don't know if I really liked or didn't like this book. I'm still kind of divided. If I were to truly give this like half ratings, I would give this like a 3.5. I feel comfortable doing that. There were a lot more content warnings that I would have liked to have gotten for this book. So please check the doc with the content warnings for this book. It gets quite graphic and it really made me uncomfortable in a lot of places. So it might be a little spoilery, but also I want to prepare y'all for going into this book. So that's it. That was a month of reading all the books that BookTube made me want to read in 2020. And I feel like it is only fitting that I do my own little ranking of how much I enjoyed these books. I'm having a hard time rating these, so just know that like the top 5 were basically all pretty equal in my eyes. So I think first was Middlegame, then The House in the Cerulean Sea, then The Beautiful, then Red, White, and Royal Blue, and then I think The Midnight Library. These Violent Delights and Lock Every Door, I think, are tied. Then I think Mexican Gothic and The Year of the Witching are tied. And last is Anxious People and Jade City are tied. Wow, that was actually really hard. I do want to emphasize that I feel like I had a really good reading month. Like all of these books were pretty darn good. Some of them, like, I could say that they weren't for me, but like objectively, I feel like they were really good because I still wanted to like finish them and find out what happened. So through this, I think that BookTube definitely does, hype up a lot of books that, deserve hype. Obviously, I think it also depends on like the people you follow, because I know some of these books that I feel like were really hyped weren't hyped to other people just because like of the booktubers they follow. So that might just speak more to how well curated my subscription feed is. Anyways, if y'all have read any of these books, please let me know in the comments what you thought about them, and if my ranking is completely opposite or similar to yours. And also let me know if you want to see another version of this in the future with more hyped books from BookTube. My list is never ending, and I'm more than glad to read amazing books that everyone's been talking about. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please click like, and if you want to see more, click subscribe, and I'll see you all next time.